I'm excited today. I'm joined by conservative Momma, who actually I believe had me on the show, and perhaps vice versa. I think we had each other on each other's show. So I'm excited to have you back on as a guest years later. And the topic today is Republican Party's relationship with Israel and Zionism, and also I think the huge culture battle that's going on, not just from a Christian perspective, but from a conservative perspective. So thank you for joining me.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you
being
so
here.
much for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Should be fun, folks. Give us a
Should be
thumbs
fun.
up in the chat and a thumbs up for the algorithm. If everything sounds good, Dream Rare Podcast starts now.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles.
What's going on, everybody? So conservative Momma was game. I saw her. I posted, so I'll just give people the backdrop of this conversation / debate, whatever it turns into. I posted a video basically confused at Christian conservatives who are Zionists or huge supporters of Israel, because I was confused about, or at least questioning, if you think that our support of them will lead to the end times and it's pretty close, then why would we also be fixing the country when it eventually has to fail? She left a very thoughtful comment from a Christian perspective, and I was like, oh, perfect. I'd love to have her on because I've spoken to her before. She was very thoughtful about it, and I thought it would be a perfect kind of jumping point to see each other's perspectives and also talk about things that I believe are purposely being suppressed and mislabeled in conservative media in order to get people pissed off.
Right. Okay, well, here we go. It's happening. I think of like something that's being thrown around a lot that we have to discuss is Zion. Like, what is Zionism? Like, what's the term of Zionism?
Right.
Because I think it's being misused, or so what's your definition of Zionism?
So Zionism, I believe it started with Theodor Herzl, who was, I believe, a non-religious Jewish guy who had an idea to create, a homeland for the Jews. And I believe they were floating different ideas, not just in the land of Palestine or Israel. Also, even in Africa, they were trying to figure out what made sense because, obviously being scattered amongst nations and having no homeland probably sucks. Like, I totally sympathize with that thought of like, yeah, everyone has a nation. We don't have a nation, like we want one. So they kind of worked to get one. And then I believe that the land of Israel was given to Lord Rothschild through the Balfour Declaration of England, and that established the land of Israel. But now I guess this is what I'll say as far as like that's the history of Zionism and where the word came from. Right. Now I see what you're saying. It's being spoken a lot. People are saying anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. It's getting confusing. I'll just speak on my perspective because I can't speak for other people. My issue is that the Republican Party seems to prioritize Israel over America, the Constitution, the border wall, pretty much anything, and then when I point that out, I just get called anti-Semitic for being like, I think Republicans for some reason are prioritizing that over America. Or I'll say, I noticed that there's donors that I've watched interviews of that clearly have a massive loyalty to that country. But then if I point it out, they say it's, an anti-Semitic trope to say that people are funding it. So I would say that's the history of it. And my personal issue is not with the existence or the creation or I'm not a liberal protester with a pharmaceutical mask on. It's more the fact that the Republican Party seems to prioritize it over everything.
Right. And okay. There's a lot to unpack there. So as far as Zionism goes, I believe that it's a land called forth by God for the Jewish people. And it goes all the way back to Genesis 15. And before that, a covenant made with Abraham in Genesis 12. And the land is specifically laid out in Genesis 17. It actually lays out Israel and actually more expansive than Israel. So if you're going to talk about the land, then you would have to say that God himself is Zionist because he declared this land for the Israelites, for the Hebrew people, like over 6,000 years ago. Now, do I see a lot of people being controlled by people in Israel that are not necessarily good people? Yes. And this is the thing. there can be good and bad both in one place. Like, I think that there are good people with good intentions in Israel, and I think there are bad leaders in Israel as well. And so you have to be able to decipher all that. And I think like just blanketing all like there, you know, saying speaking out against Israel is not necessarily anti-Semitic. I don't think so. I think that you should be able to speak out against any leadership whatsoever. And I do not think that America should get involved in foreign places. Really, I think that we have so much problem here at home with an open border, with the poverty that we see amongst veterans, the annihilation of the middle class. I mean, I am having to pinch over here, like trying to incorporate kids sports and all the stuff just with inflation in itself. Like, we are hurting here at home. And so I don't think that we need to be getting involved in foreign activities. But at the same time, as a Christian, I support Israel from a biblical perspective because it's intertwined all throughout Scripture. And so we can dive into that in a minute. But I think like it's important to, I think that a lot of people, like, you have to be all or nothing. And I don't think you have to be. I think that you can still see both sides. And it's gotten so just like, there's just so much dealing with all of these people and everyone's yelling. And it's like, okay, like, hold on, let's like slowly dissect it.
Right.
So,
well,
kind of
yeah.
what
Yeah, I'm glad you came on. I want to get into the biblical angle of it second, because I'm not against that interpretation of it. I just think that the relationship of America and Israel is leading to America getting a short end of a stick. I want to use this as an example because I do want to talk about the biblical aspect of it, but just from a political conservative aspect of it. I saw you did a video just on your feed of the new bill that was passed by the House, the AntiSemitism Bill.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you were against it from a free speech standpoint.
I was.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I don't think that the government should be policing our speech in any way. And I disagree with a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing, and the anti-Semitism of like literally killing a race and all of it. Like, but I don't think that either side should be censored. I think that you should be able to say whatever you want to say and like let debate take place. So that's where I stand on that.
Did you read the laws? Like, it wasn't about violence. It's like saying you can't accuse a Jewish person, like say Ben Shapiro, of having loyalty to Israel. You can't criticize Israel more than another democratic nation. You can't say Jews killed Jesus. You can't compare them to question history. Like, but I'm just to be clear real quick. Because usually when people either defend or kind of write off the speech laws, I'm not saying you did, they'll just say like violence, crazy. People want to hurt everybody. But like if you actually read, it's called the Working Definition of Anti-Semitism. It was established by an international group under the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in Bucharest. And have you read like all the rules? Because it goes far, far beyond that.
I actually have them, which is so weird that you say that. Give an example of anti-Semitism, and then I think it was
like saying mendacious, dehumanizing things about people owning media companies or like political institutions.
You should be able to say all of that, and I don't think ever some foreign agency should be depicting what Americans can and cannot say. Like that just bridges on our Constitution. So
the reason I asked you that, because I saw your video and I saw that you're against it. When did you find out that was being passed into American legislation?
Well, I know that Trump attempted to do it, but just I think it became more public knowledge under Biden.
Right, but why do you think it became public knowledge under Biden?
Because I think that more organizations can, because the whole free speech approach. And I think like sometimes, and I'm going to say this, sometimes on our side, when our side is doing something, or when conservatives or Republicans are doing something, you're slow to like come out against it, which it shouldn't be that way. And I do appreciate you for calling Trump out on a lot of stuff that you disagree with, because I think that we should. I don't think that anyone's perfect, and you shouldn't just blindly follow.
The reason I was asking is because I figured this out in 2019, right? It wasn't just passed. Trump passed it through executive order. So this new bill is basically codifying what he passed through executive order. Biden kept the executive order because it's a uniparty executive order. DeSantis passed it in a bill for religious freedom or religious discrimination in 2019 in Florida, except only one religion was named, and it also provided protection for non-religious ethnic people of that group and the foreign country. It was the IHRA laws. And then since then, it's probably been passed probably over 100 times. I'm not even joking. It's been passed in certain states. You need to make an Israeli loyalty pledge in order to get a government contract. Sarah Huckabee Sanders passed it. Kemp passed it. Youngkin passed it. It's hard to find a Republican that won't pass it. What's also interesting is it's been passed in Argentina. It's been passed in Brazil. If you just pick a country and close your eyes and Google it, they've already probably passed the IHRA laws. So they're basically global blasphemy laws for Israel and Jews. I mean, that's just what it is. It's limiting people's speech for one group only, which is only causing more, questions. And then the more questions you ask, they just keep calling you anti-Semitic. But the reason I wanted to bring this up real quick is once I figured out that Trump was infringing on the First Amendment, basically for Israel, and I'd come to the conclusion that, he has donors in the Republican Party. He's deceased now, so I just want to say rest in peace and be respectful. And his wife, I think, has taken over. But Sheldon Adelson, he donated even more than George Soros donated to the left in the one election cycle. I think it was 2018. And I've seen him on stage basically say that, unfortunately, he served in the American military and he wants his kids to serve in the IDF. So if he said, unfortunately, it seems like he has loyalty to Israel, right? But if you point that out, that Trump and the GOP is getting hundreds of millions of dollars and then passing speech laws for a foreign country, the press smears you as anti-Semitic. And it's not the liberal press, it's the conservative press. Right. It's Charlie Kirkgate keeps it, Ben Shapiro Gate keeps it. They're saying they're against it now, but I know that they knew in 2019 and they did everything they could to just try to make it seem like it was them versus the anti-Semites. It's us versus the bad guys in order to basically gatekeep those hate speech laws. So what I'm saying is, before we get into like the biblical aspect of it, from a conservative American aspect of it, I think it's a straw man to say that people are hurting or hating or, that they don't support a country, when in reality, I think a lot of people, I can't speak for everybody, but they're looking for a fair relationship. And if we can't even get a border wall, we're sending tens of billions of dollars to foreign countries, we're getting blasphemy laws in our country for one group, one race, one religion in one country. And then when you talk about it, Republican media runs around and calls you an anti-Semitic. Is it fair to say that it's not simply the fact that the Republican Party supports Israel that is bothering a lot of people? It's the fact that they're so wildly subservient to Israel, to the point where I think nearly every Republican media company in America is less critical of Israel than Israeli media is even critical of themselves. So it's like, why is almost all Republican American press so in the bag for Israel that they'll literally not talk about an anti-First Amendment bill for 5 years, and they'll smear anybody that talks about it? Isn't that a little strange?
Well, yes, and I do think it ties to a lot of the biblical side of it. I think that the thing is,
does Jesus want me to get smeared as an anti-Semitic for supporting the First Amendment? Is that
no?
What Jesus
but what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of the people that are speaking out against Israel also posting memes like in support of Hitler. So like you have to it's all become like one big thing. Like if you're talking about, hey,
hold on a second. I mean, I could also say that they're slaughtering tens of thousands of people. So you having that opinion that you're basically want to slaughter children, but I'm not saying that. I'm doing a good faith debate. You couldn't even make a fair explanation for 5 seconds without jumping to the most extreme cases.
But
you have nothing for what I said, though, because you have nothing for what I said.
No, because
you have no argument.
Well, because you see those people tied, right? Because
I see you tied to the babies getting slaughtered in Israel. Should I say that to you? I didn't, because I'm trying to be honest and have a good, fair debate. But and when I look at you, I could see that as well. But that's not like a reasonable, fair point to make. I'm not going to accuse you of that. But you're basically saying that it's all tied.
Right. I don't.
But our foreign aid is literally tied to babies being slaughtered. You know that when you support Israel and you don't talk about the foreign aid, or you're totally okay and you smear everybody as anti-Semitic that talks about it, you know that your opinions are literally tied to babies being slaughtered and women being slaughtered.
But I'm not tying everyone to being anti-Semitic. I don't think necessarily calling out foreign aid or saying, hey, we shouldn't be funding this country, let's keep our money here at home, is anti-Semitic. I don't think I think you should be able to say that. I think you should be able to say whatever you want to say. And if you want to speak out and call for an annihilation of a certain,
but no one's. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
Right,
You didn't.
right,
You didn't address anything I just said. You just went to the most extreme example that you could possibly think of like the most extreme person that you saw a meme of posted. That has nothing to do.
Because a lot of the people that are speaking out against foreign aid also have like a strong, I would say, dislike, possibly hatred for a certain race of people. But there's the people in the middle that are saying, hey, I don't want to be tied. I don't want our money tied.
Yeah,
I don't want
that's like me saying that most of the people, that's like me saying that a lot of the people that disagree with BLM are racist and they hate all black people and they want to hurt all black people. Like, it's like that. That's like the logic that you're going with. I just spoke for 6 minutes eloquently about what's going on. And the first thing you did was jump to the most extreme example and then try to tie any thought in that category to the most crazy extreme thing that you can possibly think of.
Let's talk about it then. Let's talk about, like, okay, we have money going over to Israel.
I just spoke. I just want to let you know I just laid out my argument. I just laid out my argument that the First Amendment was infringed on in 2019 and Republican media ran around calling everyone anti-Semitic that pointed it out. That's why it took 5 years for people like you to figure it out and talk about it, because that's what Republican media was doing. And the first thing you did was jump and say, well, I'm going to not only not address what you said, I'm going to just basically try to smear anybody in the category that knew that the First Amendment was being infringed on in 2019, because I saw a bad boy meme on Twitter.
No, I have always stood in support of free speech. Always. I've been in this for almost 10 years. And every single time, any kind of bill, any kind of proposition calling for any kind of censorship of speech, I'm against. I am against. And the fact that it was more publicized under Biden is because...
What I'm just saying real quick is the reason it was publicized is because Republican media is so in allegiance to Israel and Zionism that the second that people realized at this crossroads, right? Was at the time, I had no thought process of Israel. I'm not from there. I'm not Palestinian. It's not a country that was even really on my radar. I've obviously heard of it, but it's like I got to a crossroads where the First Amendment was being infringed on for Israel. And I noticed and I spoke about it and I got blacklisted from Republican media and they started smearing me behind the scenes as far right and anti-Semitic, kind of like you're suggesting now, for simply pointing out, no, hold on one second, for simply pointing out that the First Amendment was being infringed on. So this is the whole point of this discussion. When it becomes First Amendment or Israel, the Republican Party goes Israel. They wipe their ass with the First Amendment. Then all the Republican media that's pro-Israel calls everybody anti-Semitic and sweeps it under the rug. So the reason that it became public under Biden is because Republican media is covering up the fact that they're selling out the First Amendment, because their allegiance is not with the American people or the Constitution. Their allegiance is, there's something greater than that. There's a bigger priority that they have, and it's not the First Amendment.
Right. I agree with that. And I think that a lot of it, if we're going to be completely honest, I think a lot of it ties to people's faith. I think that that's what you're seeing with Speaker Johnson right now. I think that he is letting his faith dictate a lot of the legislation that you're seeing pass the House. And I think that that's true. And
does his faith say that? But does his faith say that he needs to pass a speech law that says that it's anti-Semitism and it's hate to say that, to talk about Jews killing Jesus? And I'm not here to debate the Romans or the Jews, but it's like you think a Christianity is telling him to basically make blasphemy laws, not for his religion, basically against his religion and against discussions about his religion. How is that Christian?
I don't think that it is Christian.
So then how is his Christianity leading him to do that?
I think it's clouding. I think it's clouding people's visions. I think it's clouding people's judgment on how they see things and how they're going to proceed from here. And that's why the whole biblical eschatology, all of it comes into play. And I think we're starting to see that. And I think that it's overriding the way people are viewing the world right now. I do. So I think that's where we're at, if we're going to be completely honest, because at the end of the day, I think people, they put God first, right? They put their relationship with God first. Most people do, that are religious. Okay. And then it's probably your country or your family, then your country. Like, there's a tiered system. And so if you're going to be honest, I think a lot of these people are putting their faith at the forefront. And that's why you're seeing a lot of what you're seeing. Do I think that but I don't think overriding the First Amendment, which I'm a total supporter of the Constitution, which I do believe was established by people that loved God, most of them. I don't think that overriding the Constitution to support a nation that is blessed by God I wouldn't make that call. I don't think that's the right call to make. I don't. And I do think that the more you censor speech, the more hate you're actually going to cause. I think we're going to see a rise of anti-Semitism, even more than we're seeing now. I think you're going to see more of the world rise up against Israel. That's what the Bible talks about. That's what the Bible says is going to happen. And I think a lot of these players are actually being used to push that forward. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. And maybe they're not even aware of it, to be honest. I don't think a lot of these people are even aware that they're being used to push this agenda forward. So
is it possible? Do you think it's possible that it's not their faith dictating these decisions to pass basically blasphemy laws against Christianity, their own religion? Do you think it's possible that it's donor money, hundreds of millions of dollars of donors, in the same way that,
well, if you want to, you can go into and hey, I'm a big conspiracy theory person.
Well, it's not conspiracy. Donor money is not a conspiracy.
You want to talk about Jews running the world? Is that
no?
That's kind of
no. Well, this is. But here's the thing. But here's the thing. It's if I say I'm so glad you came on. If I say big pharma paid off both parties in order to, get politicians to support the pharmaceutical industry, you would be like, yeah, no, that's true. But the second that I say that donors are giving hundreds of millions of dollars to both parties, but the Republican Party to do these things, you go to this conspiracy theory in your head, which is exactly what the left would do to you if you talked about the pharmaceutical lobbying money. They would, I made up a word. It's called anti-pharmetic, which means, you're suggesting that big pharma controls politicians. It's anti-pharmetic. It's,
right.
Anti-science.
So do you think you think big donors are paying people to support Israel and to support to suppress free speech, anyone speaking out against Israel? Is that what you think is going on? If you're going to be honest.
I think that donors pay politicians to influence politics. I don't think that. I know that. I don't even question that. I think that's 1,000% true. If a major donor, a billionaire, say, for example, Bill Gates gave $100,000 to Doug Burgum in North Dakota, do I think he really just likes North Dakotans? Not really. Maybe. But I'm guessing there's some sort of transaction for that 100,000, even though Bill Gates could give a lot more money. But for a state race, that's a lot. I'm telling you. But let me tell you real quick.
Yeah,
because I already told you, but maybe it went over your head. George Soros. People talk about him donating to the left, right? There's a donor that gave more money than George Soros gave to the one election, hundreds of millions of dollars, not $1 million like Pfizer gave to Trump. That seemed to be enough to get Trump to hire pharmaceutical lobbyists. $1 million, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's on paper. It's nothing crazy. I mean, you could look up donor money. It has to be public in America for the most part. He's on stage saying, unfortunately, I served in the American military and I want my kids to serve in the IDF. He gives hundreds of millions of dollars to the GOP. Within 2 years, they're passing these speech laws. And when they're passing it, you could just look at who's in the room. Alan Dershowitz, who's still a Democrat, who says he's going to leave the Democratic Party if they don't stop with this Israel stuff, which means the border wall, nothing that's happened in the last 20 years made him want to be a Republican, except for this topic. But of course, it's also anti-Semitism to say that he likes that country, because now that's hate speech according to the hate speech law. He was in the room. Jared Kushner was in the room. Trump gave the one donor's wife a Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean, it's not really rocket science to me. Do I think that these donors don't want these anti-Semitism laws? No, of course not. Or else they'd speak out against it. Or honestly, they'd probably get the Republican Party to stop. Because if you give hundreds of millions of dollars to a politician, there's a lot of influence to be had. So it's not just that I think that it's happening. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me.
Right. But don't you think telling someone they can't talk about something okay, let's say all of them are putting this money forward and they're saying, hey, let's push these these anti-Semitism laws, tell people they can't talk this way. Don't you think that that's going to make more people want to talk that way? Like, isn't that just a natural and like in the human, when I'm told I can't do something, I
Right.
want to do it. Like, it makes
Well,
me want to do it. So
right.
what is the agenda behind that then? If you're like, hey, don't do this, do you think that's going to help the situation or hurt the situation?
I think it's not. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a terrible strategy.
Right.
I've even since 2019, I was like, this is not good. This is not a good way to create like healing and peace and
No.
whatever. Like it's so bad. But here's the thing: this is what happens when you have no self awareness and no self accountability, and you're constantly playing the victim. Is you never think of these things because you're always just blaming someone else. Like So
Right.
I think I think on one hand that maybe they want people more upset because then that can justify more things. Or I think that some people are so completely oblivious that it's just like, like they have zero self accountability. Like in their eyes, it's always everyone else's fault. They're always the victim. And anybody simply stating any factual statement is hate speech and needs to be like abolished, which is like you said, like a crazy way to get people to like you. I mean, it's the worst way too, but
so
that's the thing is like, I think
right. I think
and
that
it's real quick. Sorry, it's being passed all over the world. So it's like, why would Christy Noam, a state that probably has like such a small amount of that ethnic group and that religion, and she's codifying into law the IHRA laws, like, is it really hate speech to say that there's some sort of power going on there to get these politicians to do it? Or do you think the governor or the mayor of São Paulo in Brazil just woke up and was like, I'm going to write the same exact hate speech phrases on a piece of paper and sign it into law in Brazil and Argentina?
Right.
Like,
I think it's stupid. So you have to think like either these people are really stupid or it's going to cause more hate, more anti-Semitism, more like anger. And I think like, okay, there's so many different ways to look at this, but if you want to cause like a complete upheaval of civilization, if you want to do a reset, if you want to disrupt peace, you cause hate, you cause war, you cause disruption, you do everything you can to disrupt what is in place in order to be able to replace it. So I think all of this there's a deeper agenda at play, and it's past all of this. It's beyond a lot of what we're seeing now. I think it goes a lot deeper, and I think that there's bigger players on the scene that are behind the scenes, causing a lot of this. Personally, that's what I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, I also think that it's like, it's just basic human nature where I think if you're doing like, obviously, no, everyone's not going to like you. That's definitely part of the equation of life. But I think generally, if you are decent, then people will like it. But, this seems to be, in my opinion, a trend of like passing hate speech laws. And even like Ben Shapiro, if you watch his show, like he likes Israel, obviously, right? Like everyone knows Ben Shapiro likes Israel. I have no problem with that. It makes complete sense to me. Like, why wouldn't he like Israel? I've never thought that was weird. I'm just like, he likes Israel, but he'll tweet out these hate speech rules and say that it's anti-Semitism to say someone of my ethnicity and my race is loyal to Israel, even though he's basically said it on a stage. So now his literal opinion, he considers anti-Semitism. And if you say it, he'll call you an anti-Semite. So it's like, even if you suggest that Israel did anything purposely, like I could say America did this purposely or George Bush did this purposely. But if I say Israel did it purposely, he then accuses people of blood libel. He's tweeted that's blood libel. So, and then if I said, Ben, you're being really sneaky, he'd be like, oh my gosh, that's an anti-Semitic trope. Are you getting it? Having no accountability and no self-awareness and constantly playing the victim and treating people that way is not going to be popular. So instead of changing your actions and being more honest, it's like Ben would just say it's hate speech to say that it's happening, which just makes people not like it more. So it's like almost like the best way to stop between all the ethnic groups, the best way to stop the hate is just to be more honest. But that's something that people like Ben don't want to do. Like he just constantly wants to play the victim and constantly wants to say that everyone else is just being so hateful and that you can't even really say he's sneaky because saying he's sneaky is like an old trope or whatever. It's like, instead of just not being sneaky, he wants to basically stop people from like suggesting that he likes Israel when everyone knows he likes Israel. So it's like, this is why, most people say to the Black community in America, history is awful and we condemn it, but also it's time to like pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and really crush it in America because this is a great land. But if you said that to someone like Ben Shapiro, they'd call you an anti-Semite. So I think that
I think that right, and I think if Ben was on, like, and I don't know Ben Shapiro, I'm not part of the crew with all that. There's a group of people, and I'm not part of it. But I think that if he's honest, because of his Jewish faith, you have an alliance to Israel. I mean, and that's just that's just normal. I don't think that. Right, and I think that to say that is not wrong. Just like if you're, from different parts of the world, and if you're Buddhist, you have an alliance to China, and so like depends on where those roots of that faith come from. I think that you're gonna have an affinity for that. You just are. Fine. And so I don't see anything wrong with that, but I think that being honest about it is important.
I just want to give a quick example. Like, I'm part Italian. If I said it's anti-Italian to say that I love Italy, or I have loyalty to Italy, but I'm talking about Italy every stream, and I want special speech laws for my people, it would make people more annoyed. So it's not the fact that Ben likes Israel. I have no problem with that. It's the fact that he obviously has some loyalty to Israel, which everyone respects and knows. But then also he literally has tweeted out that he thinks it's anti-Semitic to suggest anyone of his ethnic group or religion has loyalty to Israel. He said every American Jew has loyalty to America, which is a totally subversive thing to say. It's like every Chinese person in America has loyalty to China. Or any suggestion otherwise is anti-Chinetic, and it's like, what? Like it's obviously so disingenuous, but like that's what I'm saying. I think self-awareness and actually like analyzing people's own actions would lower the hate, but instead they just keep bulldozing forward with these hate speech rules and lopsided relationships and calling everybody that notices anti-Semitic. So, as somebody that wants to lower the hate in the world, obviously, and I want to stop the wars, this isn't good for anybody. I think self-awareness and self-accountability is like one of the main factors. But even saying that is also honestly considered anti-Semitism, because just simply suggesting that.
I think it's going to be misused, and I think it's being misused too much, and then eventually it doesn't have any weight. Like if you use something like, Trump is a fascist, that's what we heard all the time, or he was if you use it so much, it's like, okay, you call someone a racist all the time, it's like it doesn't hold its weight anymore. So I think like we're heading in that direction, and then we're also going to see actually a rise of more hate because of people being told they can't do something. That's just human nature. But like, oh no, go ahead.
No, I guess like with that being said, like I personally, I just want to like get just back to this. Like, you think it's because of their faith. I think it's because they're getting paid. I don't think even every time people like, here's the thing I just like printed out, like Ben Shapiro said, follow the money. Joe Biden's taken like $11 million from AIPAC. But if you pointed that out, that's anti-Semitic, of course. But in general, it's like every politician that says I stand with Israel, they're also taking donor money. It's like, can you stand with them without taking money and having your intern tweet that you stand with them? And here's why I don't believe that they actually even care about Jewish people. During the pandemic, when Israel was under one of the very strict lockdowns and a lot of Israelis were complaining, where was Mike Pompeo? Where was Donald Trump? Where was Ron DeSantis? Where were any of these people? Where was their big stance for Israel and the Jewish people? It doesn't exist. They stand up at donor meetings with, like a little backdrop, and they do these little speeches to make money. And then when Jewish people actually have complaints in their country or they're suffering some sort of persecution, all of these Republicans are nowhere to be found.
Right. And a lot of them were being forced vaccinated. I remember that was taking place. And I totally disagree with that. And so I will say, I disagree with a lot of the stuff that the government of Israel does. But if we want to talk biblically speaking, the reason why I think a lot of Christians stand with Israel is because of Israel's role all throughout the Bible, and it is part of eschatology. And then you can get into, there will be people watching this that will hate me saying that the church does not replace Israel, but a lot of people believe that the Christian church replaces Israel and that Israel is irrelevant. But that I do not find that biblically accurate at all. And I've spent a ton of time studying scripture, and especially all throughout, even when you go to just different, especially in Romans, Paul specifically addresses the church. And then in Romans 11, he goes on to address Israel. And he basically says that Israel is temporarily blind right now. They're not going to even receive the gospel. They don't even want to have anything to do with it. It's like a temporal blindness that's been put on them until the full amount of Gentiles come into the faith. And then God will turn his attention to Israel. And then Israel's mentioned in Revelation. It's mentioned in Zechariah 14 about Jesus literally coming back to the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And before that all takes place, it talks about all of the world rising up against Jerusalem. And I love that, because a lot of people that talk about the church replacing Israel say Israel, it's a different Israel. You're not speaking about Israel. It's not the land of Israel, but it specifically says Jerusalem. And there's only one Jerusalem right now in the world. And that's what we're talking about. So a lot of this has to unfold. And I think like a lot of these anti-speech laws against anti-Semitism, a lot of these speech laws against anti-Semitism just will further push this, what has been spoken of the whole world rising up against Jerusalem. So I actually think that we're heading in that direction. Now, where we are in time, I have no idea. The pendulum could swing. This could all be hundreds of years out, or we could be getting closer to it. But I think when you start to see all of this angst centered around, a country the size of New Jersey, there is a spiritual, you can feel it if you're paying attention, all of this hate against this one little country. And I think it is biblical. I think it is spiritual. And I think that that's kind of where we're heading right now, to be honest with you, if I was going to break it all down. So I think that is why a lot of people think the way they think. And the Christians are divided on this too. I mean, you have about, I would say 60 to 70% of Christians believe that Israel is irrelevant. There's no place for Israel. Israel in the Bible is not Israel today. All of that. You've got a lot of people that are preterists that believe that all biblical prophecy has already taken place, and we're kind of in a post-millennialism state right now. And then you've got people that have believed that a lot of biblical prophecy has not been fulfilled, like me, and we're watching some of that start to play out.
All right, yeah. So I want to stick on that note, because I think, for the sake of this discussion, this is what really spurred it. I don't want to debate the biblical angle of that. I'm going to just say, because I do disagree, and I agree with people on the other side, but I want to stick with this because I think that this mindset that Christians have is why America is failing. And I think that, I know that you said like this is kind of part of it too, where it's like, I think at this point where it's like, when it comes to, Israel and the amount of hate they're receiving, I would say 5 years ago, I would have been like, I don't understand it. It's crazy. Everybody's being hateful. But now it's like, okay, it would be like if they tried to pass a speech law in America that said like, you can't criticize Ukraine more than another democratic nation. It's like, but Ukraine's doing more now. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I hate Ukraine. I don't talk about like Norway because they're not doing anything on the world scale. They're just kind of like sitting there acting goofy and liberal. But like, Israel and Ukraine are the center. So it's like this idea that they're just mysteriously, it's like, even Ukraine, there's no hate speech laws for Ukraine in America, although they seem to be getting more foreign aid in the present moment. With that being said, let's just say that your version or your interpretation of the Bible is true. America is going to fail. America's going to fail because Republicans are basically prioritizing a foreign country. Like they said that they would not budge and they would get the border because we're giving money. And I know you know this and probably agree with me on it. We're giving money to Ukraine to fight over their border. We're giving money to Israel to defend their border or potentially even expand their border, and take more land. But at bare minimum, defend their border, Iron Dome, etc. Right. And Republicans, they said, we will not, we won't move. And the border doesn't even cost, our border doesn't even cost that much considering how much money we've spent. And they didn't do it. So that shows me that they prioritize foreign countries over America. If you prioritize Israel over the First Amendment, which Republicans do, you lose the First Amendment. If you change your religion from Christianity to Judeo-Christianity and you put an entire other religion in front of yours that, let's just be honest, is a different religion. They don't believe in Christ. a lot of them don't even like Christ. They're not following the same playbook, which is, it is what it is. I believe in religious freedom, but Christians in this country used to be Christians. Now they're Judeo-Christians. And now we have hate speech laws. And I want to just give you like one example of an individual, but one of the founders of pornography, which is, a lot of Christians seem to be the biggest critic of pornography. His name was Al Goldstein. You could read his exact quote in his book. I think it was called Screw. And he specifically said that he was creating pornography to subvert WASPs, which he was calling white people, and Christians. He despised them. Like, he wrote disgustingly of them. So what's, if anti-Semitism is when someone else's speech is perceived as being hateful towards that group, what's it called when that group is being hateful towards my religion and my ethnicity? It's called anti-Semitism. You know why? Because simply noticing that it's happening is hate speech. You're not only not allowed to say anything, you just have to pretend like it's not even happening. So it's anti-Semitism whether someone's doing something hateful, because you're not even simply supposed to notice that they're doing it at the expense of your race or religion purposely. You know what I'm saying? That's what he said. He's an individual. I'm not blaming everyone for that, but that's what happened. With that being said, our country, we don't have a dog in the race. We don't have a real party. The Republican Party infringes on the First Amendment. They work for these foreign wars against America's interests. Most of the Republicans support Ukraine, although the base doesn't. And Ukraine is just getting gayer. It's like a little crude way of saying it, but like Russia is getting more Catholic and Ukraine is turning into San Francisco. They have like sodomy blasphemy laws now where it's like LGBTQ plus. It's like they're getting more liberal and we're fighting the more conservative nation. Okay. And then in the Middle East, it's the same thing. You got Charlie Kirk saying that Palestine's not gay enough. And he's like, there's drag races in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. And it's like, okay, but don't you complain about the ones in San Francisco? But the point that I'm making is like, if I understand the interpretation that's like, we have to support Israel. There's going to be hate that's rising. This is going to happen. Christian dispensationalists are basically manifesting the end times. So this is the whole reason I made that video. And I want to hear your response is like, I respect it, but let's just be honest and stop being like, oh, let's stop giving money. Let's fix the border wall. Let's not, because like it's not, there's no way the country is going to be fixed when our party is subservient to a foreign nation that cares about themselves, as they should. Right. But our politicians don't care about us. And if Christians want them to keep Israel in such great regards, then it's going to be at the expense of our nation.
Right. Okay. Well, I think like when you say dispensationalism, that's just simply taking God's word literally. And so if he made a promise, he's going to keep it. He made a promise to Abraham. He's going to keep it. Psalms 105 reiterates that the promises that God makes, the covenants that he makes are everlasting. So just because he can't negate on that. Our very existence literally hangs on God's words. God did not think this world into motion. He spoke it into motion. So if he goes back on his word, all of this comes crashing down. So he has to stay true to that. The Abrahamic covenant is different than the Mosaic covenant. The Mosaic covenant is the laws. You have to keep the laws. Jesus came and broke that. He said, you do not have to keep these laws. I came, I paid the price. I'm the perfect lamb, the perfect sacrifice. As far as what Christians are supposed to do in America, I believe that we are to occupy until Jesus comes. That's what we're commanded to do in Luke 19. Jesus, it's the parable of this guy that goes off to receive his kingdom. And before he goes, he tells his servants, hey, I want you to occupy until I come. And he gives them each a little bit of like money. And some of them take it and they multiply it. Some of them multiply it even more and more. Some of them multiply it like tenfold. And this one guy buries it. He buries it. And then when this nobleman comes back, he says, hey, he asks what they've done. And a lot of them have shown what they've done. And then he comes down to the guy that buried his talent, his money, and says, what did you do? And he's like, I was afraid. I didn't do anything. And that's when he said, depart from me. I want nothing to do with you. And as Christians, we are called to occupy until Jesus comes. That doesn't mean you're to be passive. That doesn't mean that you're to stick your head in the sand and be like, oh no, if this has all been spoken by God, then I'm not going to do anything. If what God said is that I'm just going to be passive. No, that's not what we're commanded to do. We're commanded to occupy. You're commanded to be a light in this dark world. And that means I'm a mom. I'm called to be a light in my home and to make sure that my children know Jesus and make sure that they are good people, and they speak life into situations that they encounter. And I'm called to be a light in my community and to occupy my community, and however much influence God gives you, that's what you're called to occupy. So I don't think, and that goes with occupying America. That means that sharing Jesus here in America, being a light until he comes. So I don't think that you are to just be like, oh no, we can't. Then Jesus you're going to stand before God at some point, and he's going to say, what'd you do? What'd you do with the life I gave you? And if you're like, I just did nothing, and just hope for you to get back here. No, we're called to occupy. And if that does mean speaking out, that does mean, hey, we got to secure our border. That means we got to take care of things at home. That means that we have to call out the debauchery and all this junk that we see in our schools. That means that we have to call out people that are trying to do harm to America. Like we are to speak out. We are to be a voice. We are to be a light in the space that we've been called. And so I don't think that's right. I don't think that's good at all. And I think that with every day that passes, it's more opportunity for Christians to share Jesus, to share the gospel, to be a light in this darkness. I mean, this world's crazy right now. If you see what's happening to our kids, what's happening to families, what's happening to our world, it's messed up. And so if we and we're going to be held accountable for that. Like, we're responsible. God told Adam, replenish, take dominion. We are to take dominion, and we've kind of dropped the ball, and that's why we see what we see, I think. So
yeah, I guess my point is this, is like, if Christian Zionists in America, like that's where I see the contradiction, where it's like, on one hand, it's like, we don't want the country to fall, right? We want our border secured. We want this. We want our party to work for us. But on the same hand, they think that it's hate speech to point out how things are literally working. So it's like, it's going to fail if you don't face the reality of how things are going, or you feel like your allegiance is to a group of people in a country that they don't believe in your Lord and Savior. They are looking out for their interests as an ethnic group, as a nation, and that they have every right to. But if our politicians in America are basically subservient to them, then we're not getting anything. We're not getting a border wall. We're not getting a real president. We're going to get, Donald Trump, who does good for 3 years and then mysteriously turns into a pharmaceutical salesman and runs around saying 15 days to slow the spread, and, printing billions of dollars while America will never be another socialist nation. Like, I don't understand. Like, it's like, oh, pushing these hate speech laws is going to lead people to this, which is going to bring us closer to the end times, because with the physical land of Israel, like, they're interpreting it, and you're interpreting it as like, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. Technically, it's always getting closer, because it's always just time-wise, it's closer than it was a second ago. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like it's manifesting it like now, because it's like, there's no way the country's going to be fixed. Like, if I stand there, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but if I sit there and say, hey, they're passing anti-First Amendment speech laws in 2019, and because Christians and conservatives have a loyalty to this country, and I believe a lot of donors, but you're not allowed to say that, but it's true, then it's like they sweep it under the rug for 5 years. So that means that the First Amendment is not as important to some of these Christians as their loyalty to their interpretation to the Bible. Like, this country is going to fail. Like, there's no way it's not going to fail at that point. But
the First Amendment should be as important, because that protects your religious liberty, my ability to say what I just said here.
Right. But real quick, sorry, they don't care about your religious liberty, though. Like, they're not looking for religious liberty, because the people that you're worshiping and thinking that you have to serve, they don't care about you. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about your religion. That, like, it's not like their religion's not your religion. In fact, there were certain conservative members in Israel that were trying to pass a bill to outlaw the gospel, teaching the gospel in Israel. That was actually covered by one news organization. And here's another thing too: conservative members of Israel wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which is a more conservative paper, saying that Europe and America should take refugees. They just told you that all these people are Hamas. They just told you that all these people are terrorists. They just told you that these people are horrific, that Egypt doesn't want them. They don't want them. Not liberals in Israel, conservatives, part of the Likud party, are writing op-eds saying You take them, dummies. And this
Right.
is conservatives like, yum, I'm not like, but don't talk about it, right? So it's like
But
that's a
I
part
think
of
you
my
should talk about it.
situation.
I think you can support Israel, but like I do, but also talk about the wrong that you see. I think that, and you don't have to be one or the other. I think you can say, hey, I support the land of Israel. I support the biblical call of God that's all intertwined throughout Scripture of Israel. I support the remnant of Israel. There is a remnant, and that's specifically talked about in Romans. There is a remnant. Not all are going to fall. I mean, to accept Christ, but there is a remnant that will. The Bible talks about it. But I also am seeing, and I want to address this really quick. I am seeing also like this militant type Christian mentality come into play, and I don't think that that's healthy either. I think that we're also seeing kind of like this rise of like this, Christendom that we have to come and conquer, but it's not done in the right spirit of Christ, right? Like Jesus was, he got fired up when he went into the temple, but at the end of the day, when he was hanging on that cross, he said, forgive. He said,
Right.
forgive them, for they know not what they do. So I think like there's a lot of like animosity, and it crept into the church early on, like right after, I would say quickly after the Apostle Paul wrote Revelation. You have anti-Semitisms creeping into the church, and this kind of, hey, you crucified our Messiah, we hate you kind of a thing. And that crept in early on, and I'm starting to see it kind of come back into play here. But Jesus
So
said,
you think the Bible inspires anti-Semitism?
no, I don't think the Bible inspires. I think that I would say after about 100 AD, you started to see animosity. And with Constantine came in like, what was it, 300 AD, and he took paganism and the Christianity in order to conquer, and kind of blended a lot of that faith, and got rid of all Jewish ties of Christianity. Like up until then, Christians were practicing a lot of the Jewish sacraments and being Christian. They were like Messianic Jews basically at that time. And that was kind of rid out under Constantine. And then with the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther, he wanted to bring Christianity to the Jews. He went to the Jews. He said, hey, you can have a personal relationship. You don't have to go through a pope, all of this. And the Jews rejected it, right? They rejected it. And that made Martin Luther just furious. And he started you read some of his writings, and it's very anti-Jewish. So I think
he wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies, Martin Luther.
So yes,
that's a Martin Luther book. Yeah.
Yes. So there's a lot of that in the early church, but I think for me as a Christian, and it could be easy to get swept up into, hey, you partook in killing the Messiah. Jesus didn't stay in that grave. Okay. He rose again. And before he died and took that last breath and was buried and then resurrected, he said, forgive. So what is my job? Like, do I like what happened? No, but I'm going to walk in forgiveness because that's what Jesus told me to do. And also, what did he warn about all throughout the Gospels? Don't be offended. Don't take offense. Don't be offended. Why? Because when you take offense, you suddenly have a very easy ability to be deceived. So if you're walking with bitterness, if you're walking with offense, hey, you did this to me, or you did this to me, or they did this to him, you get offended, and then you let bitterness in, and then you start to listen to other voices that are contrary to what the Bible says in walking in love and forgiveness. So I think you have to be very careful as a Christian in these times, asking what is the nature of God in this? What this person that's spouting all of this, what is the fruits of spirit that they're exhibiting? Is it love? Is it joy? Is it peace? Is it goodness? Is it temperance? Yeah. I'm not seeing that. So that's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing a lot of that right now. And it is upsetting to me.
I want to say this too, because as far as Constantine, I wasn't around during that time. I could obviously read about it, but I've been alive, so I can speak about this time. For me personally, right? I've had, even now to this day, I have great experiences with Jewish people. I have friends, people that have been nice to me, like that, one of my best friends growing up, his family was Jewish. His mom couldn't have been nicer to me. You know what I'm saying? So she's honestly like super, super, just a good person in my life. So there was never even a thought, like I didn't even think about Judaism or Jewish ethnicity. And this is my kind of walk to it. So there's a reason I'm telling this story. So I'll make it quick. I just realized that some people were saying it was an ethnicity, right? Some people were saying it was a religion. I didn't know any of this. All I knew was like my friend's Jewish. He celebrates Hanukkah. I thought it was a religion. I didn't realize it was an ethnicity too. So I just tweeted this one time. I said, is Jewish an ethnicity or a race? My comments were filled with, it's a race, you anti-Semite. It's a religion, you anti-Semite. Oh, you're anti-Semitic? Oh my gosh, it's a race and a religion. It's both. It's neat. It's like, I was just there was no like ill will behind my question. I was like genuinely confused because having a race and a religion I'm in my 20s. I'd never even heard of such a thing. So because I got called anti-Semitic so many times and because nobody could give me a straight answer, I started researching a little bit about it. And then I started finding out stuff, right? Interesting. And then those speech laws passed, right? And the speech laws passed. And then people started calling me anti-Semitic. My friends at Conservative Media said, and you remember me in 2018, I was extremely soft-spoken. I was very, and it was like, oh, they're calling you far right. I was like, why? I'm more conservative. I'm older, I'm more conservative. I'm more Christian. But at that time, I was kind of like more middle of the road. I didn't, it was more just me trying to be honest. And I was like, why are they calling me far right when all of these people are yelling all the time about their conservative views? I'm just chilling. And they're like, oh, it's because of this on Twitter. I was like, oh, it's because I'm talking about the speech laws. So it's like getting called anti-Semitic hundreds of times, having articles written about me because I said Zionist donors donate to the Republican Party, which is literally, I could make a presentation proving it. It's not a hate speech. It's just reality. It would be like saying the pharmaceutical industry, funding someone is anti-pharmetic. It's just a cop out to try to stop people from talking about it. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is like, is there ever a time where people's own actions and own behavior needs to be in question? Because like I said, if there is no word for an individual like the guy who was the father of pornography basically being like, I'm trying to defile Christians, I'm trying to defile white people, like you could read the full quotes, it's disturbing. What's the word for that race on this race or that religion on this religion? The word is still anti-Semitism because it's anti-Semitic just to simply notice that it's happening. So, as much as we could talk about horrific people, which I also don't like, and bad people sharing this stuff, what about the actions and behaviors of people? Has anybody ever thought that maybe like people don't necessarily have to like when people say crazy stuff? And I want to say this too. I think historically, I can't speak for all times or everywhere because I'm not going to try to do that. But in general, even in America now, if you come to America, right, especially America, people came from India. If most Indians were just 100% loyal to India and they were constantly crying victim and just saying this and that and passing laws for themselves, people in America would not like it. They would single out Indians and be like, you guys got to stop doing this. Or look at the crime rates. People aren't just mysteriously racist or whatever. It's like there's astronomical crime rates in certain communities and everybody knows it. It's just nobody wants to say it because they'll be called racist. So it's like, actions matter as well. And I think in general, doing this type of stuff makes people not like certain things. And it's like all you get in return is a speech law and a false accusation. So like, do you understand that, having zero self-accountability, zero self-awareness, Ben Shapiro loving a country and then telling you it's anti-Semitic to say that he has loyalty to that country is like completely subversive behavior. And it's like, people are not going to just naturally be like, I love that. It's like, but there's never a time to call for accountability or self-awareness because just simply even saying that is like one of the most anti-Semitic things that people have ever heard, even though it's true. So it's like,
I think a lot of this escalated after October 7th, right? Like if you have Indians here and, one of their capitals was attacked and people were slaughtered. And then they were like, hey, don't speak out against us. Or I get like the sensitivity there. It's like after 9/11, and I know I'm older than you, but like I think I was a sophomore in college at the time, and it was such like a tender topic, and it was such like when that happened, there's a vulnerability, there's could this happen again? Like there's a lot of fear that happens, and I think that's what happened after October 7th.
Yeah, but before that, I was being called anti-Semitic. Before that, they were smearing me as far right. Before that, they did a total smear piece on me in conservative media that traveled throughout the world. It was like a directed, basically a smear piece. This was before it. This was long before it. The speech laws have been before it. That now can be used as like, oh, this is why, but it was happening far, far before it. Now, yes, it's gotten so extreme that now more and more people can see, but I don't think it was like that's the day that it happened. I think that's what people are going to say, because then if you disagree with them, they can, of course, smear you.
Right. So I want to know what you think, though. Like, why so much focused on this one particular nation?
Why are people focusing on it?
Well,
why
can you not? Do you feel like there's so much? If you say something, you're labeled this because you speak out against it. Why Israel? Why, out of all the nations in the world, do you feel like there's this protected bubble that you can't touch? Do you think it goes beyond money? Do you think it does have a spiritual, there's a spiritual context at play? Do you think that it's just money?
I think there's a spiritual angle at play for sure, but I definitely do think it's money and power, which of course is the first or second anti-Semitic speech law that they're trying to pass to say that it's not possible or that it's not. But yeah, of course, I mean, if America is passing a Saudi Arabian loyalty law and the whole world is passing Saudi Arabia loyalty laws, I'm not anti-Muslim, but I'd be like, yo, the Muslims or Saudi Arabia are infringing on our First Amendment. So it's like, just that alone, the fact that the whole world is doing it, I absolutely think that there's a power play. But also spiritually, yeah, I mean, I do think that in general, and like, if you, I don't know what you're allowed to say, but it's like, if you're acting in good faith, you don't need to censor everybody all the time and be completely disingenuous about it. But if you're not acting in good faith, you become almost like paranoid, and that's when you're like rushing to do all this stuff. So like, I think there is a spiritual aspect to it. And I think it relates to just not living under the same moral standards as a lot of other people. Like, for example, I've seen so many people call people racist, but they have extreme loyalty to their ethnicity. This is the same thing that annoys me with certain Black activists. I don't care that they're loyal to Black people. But then if you see another group, whether it's Jewish or white or Asian, and they're loyal to their people, you can't call them racist. If that's how you are, then why is it racist when someone else does it? You understand? Black activists don't bother me, but they bother me when it's like Colin Kaepernick's mad at the guy who does exactly what he does. Now you're just kind of a hypocrite. So I think that's an issue too, is like, there's huge ethnic loyalty in that country. There's huge religious loyalty, but there's also a lot of people that are, constantly accusing others of being too far for doing similar stuff that they're doing. So I think that there is a spiritual angle, and it goes from a certain moral standard that certain people follow. And I think that, they're not operating sometimes in good faith and with that country. Like, let me give you an example real quick. When it comes to like a pro-Israel statement, I think there's a lot of ways to be pro-Israel and support Israel against Hamas and against Palestine. And I think there's things that make sense. The world is crazy. Conquering happens. Like, I understand that America was founded. I get all those angles. But when I listen to a lot of people that are pro-Israel, their talking points are insane because they know that they don't actually have to make sense, because they could just accuse somebody of being hateful, and they know that they have a lot of power systems behind them all over the world that'll support them in their false accusations. For example, I've watched multiple very famous pro-Israel people go on television and say, well, they voted for Hamas, so, like, they voted for these people. It's like, there's so many holes you could poke in that argument. The election was in 2004, 2005. Actually, the West wanted there to be a democracy, so they made them hold that election. So kind of forced Hamas into power by a mistake or on purpose. Let's just say it's by mistake. So now Hamas is in power. I didn't elect Joe Biden. And this is recently. Like, I don't want to be killed because Joe Biden's president. People hate him. But this is the statement that, and that was in 2004. And I believe that a large amount of the population is under 18. So they're not even able to vote. And they definitely weren't then if they were even alive. So it's like, that's your justification. Or saying that they're terrorists and that a lot of them support Hamas now it's like, well, if they're getting bombed constantly by other countries, it's not that outlandish that they're supporting like the only thing they know. It doesn't make it right, but it's like, if you were in that country and just constantly getting shelled and your family's killed, do you think you'd be obsessed with the people killing your family? Probably not. But the thing is also, let's just say they are terrorists. Let's just say even the kids, even the women, they're all terrorists. That's why they deserve to die. That's why the civilian rate's up. That's why journalists have been killed in that country more than in most other situations recently. Okay. Then you have conservatives in that country writing op-eds telling America and Europe to take the refugees. It's like, why? Why will no conservatives in America say anything about it? Because they have such a blind allegiance that they don't even realize that that's happening. But if they were terrorists, why should we take them? And then you'd ask, why would our ally want us to take these refugees that they think are terrorists? And the spiritual angle of it is they don't care about us. They care about themselves, which is totally understandable, but it's annoying as an American.
But how would that help America if they do believe that they're terrorists? How would that help America?
It's not going to help America, and it's not going to help Europe, but it's going to help it. It helps Israel because they don't have to deal with them. So they just say, you guys deal with them. That's the thinking. It's like, it doesn't help us at all. That's what I'm saying. Right. But why would they write an op-ed saying that? Because it helps them, because it's like, we don't want them. Egypt doesn't want them. You take them. Like, it's like, okay. It's like throwing something to a friend of yours. Like, you deal with it, not me.
Right. Well, I mean, but you think about, I think that I personally believe that Israel would cease to exist if they didn't defend themselves. Like,
they have to send us their refugees in order to defend themselves?
I don't think they have to send I don't think Israeli refugees are coming to America. I think that they're pushing for Palestinian refugees.
Yeah, but why would our allies want us to take them when they don't want them? I think they have a right to defend themselves and exist, but clearly it's not a mutual relationship. This is my problem. We don't have an option to defend ourselves, and I don't think anybody really cares if we exist or not. Our borders wide open, our politicians don't care, and our greatest allies are not only trying to send refugees our way, but even in Armenia, the Christians are being attacked. Who do you think's funding the Muslims who are attacking the Christians? Google it. You can find an AP. Guess what country's funding the Muslims that are attacking the Christians in Armenia? Take a guess.
Who?
Here, let me look it up. Hold on. I'm gonna search it. AP arms Azerbaijan, Armenia. I want to read the exact headline. Okay. Because I don't want to be falsely accused. Israeli arms quietly helped Azerbaijan retake Nagorno-Karabakh to the dismay of the region's Armenians. That's a great ally. But don't talk about it because it's hate speech to talk about it, right? So I'm not saying they don't. I think this is not everybody. As you said, there's people online that feel differently. Me, I think Israel has the right to exist. I think Israel has the right to defend themselves. I'm not even upset at Israeli politicians or Israeli people for doing what's best for their nation. If what's best for their nation is flood America and Europe with refugees, then that's what's best for their nation. But how is that what's best for our nation? And this is my only issue, is I give them the respect. I'm not even a critic of Israel. I don't critique Israel. I just talk about it. I'm not saying they can't do this or can't do that. Who am I to tell that country what to do? They're dealing with the situation. People don't have to like it, but they're doing what they're doing, and I don't have to like it, but they're not going to listen, and they don't have to. But
you don't want to be told that you can't speak out against it. That's what.
Not even speak out against it at the detriment of my country. If my First Amendment is going to the trash, if hundreds of billions of dollars are being sent overseas as inflation's rising, nobody can afford anything. The cities are absolute shit. There's 7 million people coming across the border, and our conservative allies, the ones that conservative media in America will never question, are literally writing op-eds in conservative papers saying, why doesn't America take the refugees? They've taken them before. Why not? And these are the same people that are telling you that they're terrorists. So why would our allies want to flood us with people that they consider terrorists? Because they don't care about us, because they care about themselves, which makes total sense. But that's the whole reason I want to have this discussion. Why don't our politicians care about us at all? And until Christians realize that this is who the Republican Party is, America will fail. There's no way it's not going to fail, because we have no dog in this race. And the reason we have no dog in this race is not just because the Republican Party is completely fake and sold out and working for other interests, but it's the fact that so many conservatives are totally fine with it. They don't see a problem with it because of Jesus.
It's not, no, and like I said earlier, I think that we should care about it. I think that being passive is not being Christ-like. We're not to be passive. We're not to be like, oh, well, we can't do anything. Like, just, bury your head in the sand. Like, you can't do that. You have to get involved. You have to speak up. You have to have a voice. You have to do what's best for your country. Like, there's nothing wrong with supporting your country. There's nothing anti-Christian in supporting your country. You should support your country. I do believe this is a Christian nation, and that we are like very few nations left where you can practice religion freely. If we lose America, it's not going to be good. So we have to fight for this country. And if you fight for America, you're actually fighting for Israel. You're fighting for other nations to be the best that they can be. But America has to be put first right now. It's right now. And I think forever, like always, you always put your nation first. And because of our founding, because of their Constitution, because of our Bill of Rights, because of what it empowers the individual, the individual's ability to speak, to have a say, to be free, has to be protected. And if we lose America, the whole nation, the whole world is in jeopardy, honestly. Right. So I don't agree with this stance of just passivity and just being like, well, that makes me, I guess I don't fit in a specific box in this whole thing. Like, I can't be labeled, because I agree with you on being able to speak out against certain things that you see Israel doing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think
it's not even, I just want to be clear real quick. It's not even necessarily like Israel. It's American politicians. Israel, right. They can fund Muslims to attack Armenian Christians, but you don't have to agree with it, or you could agree with it. I mean, I'm sure there's people who do agree with them giving them arms, but most people don't even know it's happening because conservative media will barely report on it. I understand what they're doing. Makes sense. Not for America, though. That's the problem. If our party, it's not them doing stuff. It's the fact that Trump, DeSantis, the entire GOP, and most of the Democratic Party, they're fine with that. They're fine with prioritizing that above our Constitution. They're fine with prioritizing that about over our debt. They just proved that they're fine with doing that above the border. And then a lot of conservative media will smear anybody that doesn't. And similar. And I'm not, I think that you're being reasonable here. But at the beginning, it's like anytime you make a point about anything, they kind of jump to what you did at the beginning, where they just find like the most extreme example, and they're like, "Look at that," and it's like, but what about what I just said, though? And it's like, but look at all the hate and look at all the this. And it's like, what about the fact that our politicians are not prioritizing us first? And that's all I'm saying, is that I think that a lot of Christians, for biblical reasons, because they see it as the biblical Israel, we have to do this, they have a total blind spot to the point where they don't even want to think that they would ever, that this relationship isn't perfect. And I believe it's not the only reason, obviously liberalism, a lot of other things, but like, it's the reason our country's failing, because if neither party prioritizes their own values, we fail. With Donald Trump, how many Trump supporters never questioned a single thing he did? He printed so much money in 2020. He printed more money than Obama. He did an $18 billion pharmaceutical socialist deal. He took hundreds of millions of dollars from mega donors. He took $1 million from Pfizer. He hired the entire swamp. Trump is not an idiot. He's not a buffoon who got tricked by his advisors. He's a sellout. But that's a different topic. But conservatives don't even want to address that. So it's like, how are we ever going to win anything when our own party is working for everyone but us? And now it's being considered hate speech to say how it's happening in some cases because of the Christians' blind alliance with a country who doesn't share their faith, which is fine. But it's like, nothing against Canada or Saudi Arabia or Israel or Palestine for that matter, or Russia or Ukraine. It's simply America's relationship in alignment with that. And I think a lot of Christians are either playing dumb, or they just are simply unaware that this is happening, or they find out that it's happening and they side with I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to mention it.
Well, I think that it's also important as Christian. Like, I think it's foolish for Christians to think that you can force God's hand, to think that you can put certain things in motion or try to push biblical prophecy into being fulfilled. Nothing's going to happen outside of God's time. He's outside of time. He sees the beginning just like he sees the end. and there's nothing that we're going to do unless you're being used by God and he's orchestrating, and he does use people, but I don't think pushing it is going to do any. I mean, God's going to do what he's going to do, and what he's spoken will come to pass, because it has to, like, it does. So, but I don't think as Christians we're to get wrapped up in all of that. I think that we're to stay steady. I think we're to live life and live it to the fullest and be a light in the darkness, and not to get caught up in trying to push things to happen because you read it in the Bible and you're like, oh, I have, I'm going to make this happen and I'm going to fulfill this. I don't think that's godly. I don't think that that's right. I think that things will unfold as they're going to. And I don't think that, pushing an agenda to push what God said into motion is right. I don't. And I think that some of that is at play in our politics right now.
Right.
And I'm like, but like I said at the beginning, I think that a lot of this is going to accelerate. I do. I think that telling people you can't say this or you can't do that is going to make more of that happen. That's just human nature. Don't look over there, you're going to look. Don't say that, you're going to say it. So I think more of that is just going to fuel all of this to, who knows, till maybe it comes to an eruption, or maybe it dissipates and we see the pendulum swing. I don't know, but I think as Christians we're to occupy, but not to be invasive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think it's healthy to get so wrapped up in some of this stuff where it blinds you from being able to see what's really taking place, or to be able to call out. Like, if you do see a misuse of funds or misuse of people funding wars or attacks on it, like, I think it's important to draw attention to it. I don't think you should be told not to say anything.
I want to just go off of what you said there about like how it's not Christians or conservatives' role to like get so wrapped up and blinded, following certain topics. To me, this happens with the Teen Party stuff, because I think that left wingers were right about the George Bush wars, but it was really unpopular at the time because they used patriotism and like you're a terrorist. I see this lady Brigitte Gabriel or something. She's like literally like a rehashed George Bush neocon, but she goes Trump, Trump, Trump. So Trump supporters believe her, but she's like, either you're with us or with the terrorists. It's like, shouldn't you change the Bush propaganda if you're going to push it on the new war? But in general, it's like, then Obama was a trick where it's like, change is going to come because I'm black. And then it's like Republicans were right about him. And then Trump gets in and the left loses their mind over Donald Trump and they went crazy. Right. And then the right also kind of lost their mind over Trump. So in my opinion, once I realized Trump sold out, most people weren't able to process it. And now with these protests, I think Republicans are also, it's not that they're wrong that these kids suck, but the same thing you're saying about like, don't get too wrapped up that you can't see what's going on. Both parties constantly get wrapped up where it's like you have, liberals who are freaking out over the funding of Israel at college campuses, but they're all probably mostly fine with the Ukraine funding. You post to Facebook conservatives that are over the age of 50. Most people under the age of 50 get it. But over the age of 50, you post about a meme about Israel and Ukraine, and they'll be like, yeah, cut the funding to Ukraine, but not to Israel. So it's like both sides have the similar views on different topics, but they're too stubborn to even think about why. And I understand there's a biblical perspective there as well that's fueling their wanting to fund it. But here's another thing too. It's like if, that country is funding the attack of Christians in another country, does Jesus command you to fund that country to kill Christians or to support a Muslim regime attacking Christians? It's like how I don't understand that angle of it. But I do want to say this is that I think the Republicans are kind of wrong, not about everything, but with these college protests, they're basically trying to say that it's so horrible and it's so bad. And in reality, it's like, these kids, even though if they're wrong about why and they're screaming slogans that are ridiculous, it's like they're protesting foreign funding, and America pays all the time for the foreign wars that we're funding. People hate us. Our economy is going to shit. And what do Republicans do? Republicans don't do anything. I mean, they don't want to give $100 billion to Ukraine, but they did, and they don't do anything. They go to a Trump rally, and Trump's got Lindsey Graham on the stage, and Trump's saying, "Oh, calm down, guys. I'm gonna, campaign for And it's like so it's like they always switch back and forth between the parties, and people are too foolish to understand. And I think Christians and conservatives are getting duped because 99% of Republican media is so in the bag for a foreign country that they've never thought about these things for the last 30 years, to the point where they don't even know some of these things. Most Christian conservatives have no idea that they're funding Muslims attacking Christians in another country. Most people had no idea of the speech laws for 5 or 6 years. And it's not a coincidence. It's because they're so blinded by their obsession with Trump and their idol worship. They're so blinded by their worship of a foreign nation. And they're so blinded by, team red politics and team red media, that they're 6 years late on these narratives, the same way liberals are missing stuff. So, just like Christians shouldn't be blind to this stuff, I think a lot of conservatives need to think the same way, because I think they've got tricked in so many ways recently, and they're completely oblivious of it. And when you post it, they're like, "So what do you support, Biden?" No. "Oh, so you're one of them?" No. Like, it's like they can't process the reality of it. And I do think that Republicans are being tricked over these school protests in order to justify more speech laws being passed. And in my opinion, an overreaction. I mean, this is a different topic, but it's like you got liberals making a scene on liberal college campuses where they teach complete propaganda, where they force vaccinated kids or made them take a vaccine in order to attend. It's like, let the left deal with this. I mean, if it gets too crazy, I understand, but it's like you got Republicans jumping up, being like, "Pass another speech law, pass another speech law."
That was the dumbest thing. It was absolutely, like, we had it going for us. I don't know why we got involved and we're like, now let's shut down free speech. Just let it play out. Let the crazy go. I mean, I did a satirical video I'm sure you saw that viral video of those two girls that didn't even know why they were protesting. They were asked, and they were like, "Why are we? I don't know why we're protesting." So,
right.
I mean, let them do them. Like, let that play out. Sometimes I think that we self-sabotage, and it's like, why just let the free speech go. Do not try to shut down free speech. But I also think that it's okay. I think it's important as a conservatives and Republicans. I call myself a conservative because there's a lot of stuff in the Republican Party that I disagree with. And I did speak out on Trump with COVID all throughout that. I completely disagreed on the decisions being made there, big pharma's involvement, all of it. I think that I don't think it's healthy to just blindly follow anyone. And no one is perfect. Oh my goodness, I've been married almost 14 years. And if I agreed with every single thing my husband did, that would make me a nutty, stupid idiot. I mean, there's stuff that I love him, but I disagree with some of the stuff that he does.
But what is the Republican Party doing, though? It's not like, oh, it's your husband who you slightly disagree with. Like, they're printing $7 trillion. They're trying to act like inflation's only the Democratic Party when they're in on it. They're funding hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign wars, and they couldn't even get a border out of it. And Trump is on television praising Mike Johnson and Lindsey Graham. They're not your husband we're slightly disagreeing with. They're complete fraudulent controlled opposition party that does absolutely nothing for us. The best that they can do is pass blasphemy laws in America for one race, one religion, and one country that now deems biblical discussions hate speech. So they're not simply a friend who just you slightly disagree with. They're horrific. They're disgusting. And I believe that the reason that most Republicans don't realize this is because most Republican media just focuses on the left. Look at that dumb blue-haired liberal. Look at this. So they've been programmed to be like, I must be right if they're wrong. The left's been programmed, I must be right if they're wrong. And the elites are like, these people don't get it. We're paying both sides.
Right. I agree with that. And I think that both we are being played by bigger players. That's what I think. And I do think that these anti-Semitism speech laws and all that stuff is going to lead to more anti-Semitism. And if you're a follower of the Bible and biblical prophecy, this does lead to more and more hatred for the nation of Israel. It does. And I think that, I don't know if Israel will do something or if America will do something, but I think that something will cause the whole world to rise up against Jerusalem at some point in time, whether we see it or whether we don't. I have no idea, but I think that we're on that path unless we stop it, unless we pull back, unless we say, hey, no more anti-speech laws because that's going to cause free speech laws, because that's going to cause. I feel like it's doing the opposite of what's intended, and I don't think these people are so stupid to not recognize that. I think that this is done to cause more angst.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to just say real quick, are you against like reparations, like historical reparations, giving people like hundreds of millions of dollars for, historical things?
Well, I mean, I had nothing to do with that. I don't know why someone should be held responsible for something that was done generations ago. And every single race has had slavery of some kind.
Right. I just want to say this. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, the Democrat, she gave hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations. And I've seen almost no Republican media cover it.
Wow.
Do you know who she gave reparations to? Guess.
What? Who?
Holocaust survivors. So she gave hundreds of millions of dollars, a New York taxpayer money, to Holocaust survivors. I don't know who got the hundreds of millions of dollars because it's a lot of money, how it was split apart. Right. But you have to remember, America fought against Hitler in World War II. So Americans, there's people, taxpayers that are paying for it that literally fought to help people.
Right.
But why do you think no Republican media will talk about this stuff? Because this is, it's like, and here's another thing too, is like, when a crisis arrives, that justifies, the money. And it's like one country gave reparations for October 7th already. They gave people very small amount of money, but I think it was Germany. I have to look it up, where it's like, because of October 7th, they just gave every Jewish person money.
Right. And there's a lot of skepticism around October 7th. I mean, I know we don't have time to probably dive into all that, but I think it's okay to be skeptic. I think it is. I think it's important. I think that I don't know what to sound like crazy, but like, don't trust anybody, and be skeptical. But also from a Christian perspective, and as a Christian, like, I have the stances and beliefs I have because of my faith. But I don't think that I should allow that to be duped or to be fooled or to be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to call you out on that because I'm not, I'm supposed to stand with you. No, you can still call out wrong. You can still like.
I want to. I found the article. Sorry, it's Germany to give Holocaust survivors $236 payout to help them cope with October 7th attacks. So Germany gave every Holocaust survivor $236, which is like barely anything. I mean, that's a pretty crappy reparation payment, but it's something. And Kathy Hochul gave hundreds of millions of dollars, and no one reported on it. I wonder why the media doesn't report on it. But here's the thing: is like. And I'm not saying anything about that day, because obviously you can't, but in general, I'm not questioning it, even though people in their own country do, and they're protesting, but I'm not allowed to in the United States of America. I just get smeared for that. But in general, it's like there's a lot of money going around. There's a lot of money going around, and nobody talks about it. Billions, billions, billions. Ukraine, Israel, reparations, billions, billions, billions. Hate speech laws, billion. It's not really that hard to figure out what's going on. It's just America is a piggy bank. Everyone's just getting money, and in return, we get laws that say that it's hate speech to even mention that it's happening in some form. And Republicans are totally fine with it. The Republican Party is totally fine with it. Most Republican analysts, they have a blind spot for this, but they don't even just have a blind spot for this because of religious reasons. They have a blind spot for this because everybody in conservative media knows that if you work at one of the big companies and you question this, they'll Candace Owens you. And I knew this before Candace Owens ever said anything about this topic ever. I knew that it wasn't really allowed in conservative media. I knew I was blacklisted because of it. So, it's a giant cash cow. Really, it's like the media companies are making a bunch of money. They play stupid. They wear cowboy hats. They give foreign aid to foreign countries. They pass hate speech laws in America. It's like we're just getting absolutely the short end of this stick, and that's all I'm asking for, is to not get this short of a stick. It's like, I don't need the biggest end or anything. It's just like in general, it's like how, like, we don't get a wall, we get speech laws, and that's what our politicians are doing. Like, how long? And that's the thing, is like, when people figure this stuff out, it's like, they're just being called hateful. Of course, people probably know that this is happening, but the one thing is, it is what it is, and the more that people get upset, the more money that's being spent, the more, the more bills that are being passed that just throw money around, and then it's called hate speech to even mention that it's happening. So to me, like, if people really wanted to fix the problem, they would stop calling everything anti-Semitic, have a real conversation about it, and allow for, a real discussion. But I think there's a lot of money to be made in conservative media to not say that. Thank you for the super chat, God of Blackness. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think okay, so I think that but tied to all this, there are people that really do have hate, right? So it's you have to be careful. Like, okay, you just hate these people. Okay, got it. You're in that, like, right. You hate them. But then there's people that are like, no, generally concerned about the funding and where this is going and what's happening with this and why can't I say this, and the the speech laws that are now being put in place. Like, I think that there's a lot of this all jumbled up, and it's important to be able to pick apart who you're dealing with and what their heart is in the matter.
Right. Do you hate liberals?
No.
I'm not a hateful person, but I see what you're saying.
No, I don't hate liberals. I'm not called to hate anyone. But I play them, right? I mean, you probably see me. I usually have a wig on and I look pretty wacky, but you have to have an affinity for everyone that you play. You have to have some kind of endearment for everyone for me to be able to accurately portray them. And I don't think even some of these far leftists, like, I can't hate them. I hate the policies that they support, but I don't hate the people. I don't hate that person. So I think it's important to be like, okay, I might disagree with this government or this policy or these lobbyists that are pushing all this, or the bigger, participants, but not necessarily to personalize it at play. I don't like that. But the people, like, you can't hate the people. Like, it's just like, right. That's just not. And so I think it's important to be like, okay, to look at it more from a policy perspective than a people perspective, because it's getting really personal and it's getting really heated. And that's concerning to me, because, like, stuff like that can escalate quickly. And then, it can get really nutty really fast. So it's important to keep it not personal. Don't make it personal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there's hateful people out there. There's people that are nasty. There's people in the comment section that want to push me further to say things they want to say, but they don't even show their face and say what they want to say. So it's like, why would I want to say what you say when you don't even want to say it? So I block people on Twitter that, not if they're anonymous, I don't care. But if they're anonymous, talking shit to me, pushing me, be like, do this. Like, I'm not your slave. Like, I don't care if you're media on my side, on the other side, like, don't do that. So there's definitely hateful people. I guess it's just like, where that goes. Because I think with the LGBT and BLM sort of stuff, they'll push things that are against the interests of not just America, but even people's own groups. And then they'll be like, there's a lot of hate going on, so we got to do this because, hate could lead to something else, and its words become this. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I agree on the right. I guess it's just like I think about it as that. It's like, if people really wanted to create unity between the ethnicities, there'd have to be honesty. If there's no honesty, it's never going to work. And I think in a lot of Black activists, there's a lot that I like that are probably not mainstream. The mainstream ones usually fake, but in the mainstream, and thank you, God of Blackness. Maybe you're the leader of the Black community. I appreciate you with the $50 super chat. Maybe you're the one to save the day. Thank you. Seriously, sorry I said your name weird. I was like, God of Blackness. I didn't want to, but appreciate the super chat. But in general, I think it's like, when I listen to like LeBron James and all these people, I'm fine with them pointing out all the issues, but it's like, do you not realize that people are blasting each other in these communities like every weekend? And it's like the crime rate's astronomically high and Black people are getting slaughtered, and you never care until it's a white cop. I just can't take you seriously, because I'll talk about the white cop, but you're not going to talk about the thousands of people being killed and it's race violence. Like, that doesn't exist to you. Now I know you're just lying. I think that's true with every ethnic group. Including Jewish, to be fair, where it's like, and white. I think everybody needs to be more honest and not be super biased. And if you're going to be biased, people are going to get upset and then want to be biased. And then it becomes, like you said, like this world now where everything is like bubbling up, and it's very frustrating for good people that don't want it to happen. But that's kind of my issue where, I do think, like, if I could point out somebody that I think is very honest, is I like a guy named Dave Smith. He's come on my show, but he gets called a self-hating Jew. I think a lot of even conservatives don't like him now, but to me, he's a very America first, libertarian, conservative who's just very honest. Even if you don't agree with him, it's hard to ever see him lie. Like, he's not a liar. He's just an honest guy. But sometimes people hate that. It's the same way when a black person comes up in the black community that won't play the game. Everybody says they're a race traitor and this and that.
Right.
So I think, like, for everyone, self-accountability is the solution. But it's like, there's certain groups that saying self-accountability is the solution is literally considered racist or hate speech or whatever the word is. So it's like, and I think that with my own ethnic group, I go hard on Republicans for that reason. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a liberal. I'm not out at protesting. You know what I'm saying? I don't go to Columbia. I wouldn't fit in there, nor would I want to waste my money getting a degree there. I don't even know what they're teaching ever. So that's why I talk to, like, my group, not to be hateful, but because I have the same self-accountability and self-awareness that I preach. But I think that is missing, just personally. I think that is missing in the Republican Party. I think it's missing in certain groups. And I definitely think it's even missing among some Christian Zionists. Not that they're, thought process or whatever, but just simply they're so about it that I think they haven't even considered certain things, because it's like, it's easier to just put your head down and be like, that country is that. And like, I would even say that Republican, not specifically you, but in general, Republican Christian Zionists are more loyal to Israel blindly than they are to, like, their own church or the Vatican or any, you could question what's going on there. You know what I'm saying? Even if you're a Christian or a Catholic, like, it makes sense to question certain churches or a BLM church, but like the country of Israel, I almost feel like a lot of Christian Zionists have put it almost above God, to the point where it's like, it's this entity that there's nothing that I want to even think about it. It's like, you wouldn't even extend that to your own pastor.
Right. Well, God, but for me, being a supporter of Israel and believing that God specifically set out that land for his people, I believe that he's got them. Like, me getting all caught up in it is not going to change God's relationship with Israel or what he's spoken in his word that was and is and will come to pass. A lot of past stuff, a lot of stuff that we're in right now, and then future stuff involving Israel. I don't see how. I can pray for Israel. I can pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I can bless Israel. I can keep them in my prayers, just like I pray for pray for the innocent people that are involved in Gaza as well. I can pray for them. I can pray Psalms 91 over this entire world, right? And just, God, be with us and protect us and pray for those that I love. But I'm not going to change what God's going to do with Israel. Like, I'm not a tiny little person.
So then how are you going to change American politics? Why do you even talk about American politics? How are you going to change our politics?
Well, because I believe I have you have certain influence, right? Like, I have.
But you have no influence in Israel?
I have no influence. I have no influence in Israel. No, I have influence in my home. If I'm honest with myself, I have influence over my children. I have influence in my marriage. I have influence in my kids' school, in my community. But I think that there's a lot of ego in play. Like, people think that they're a lot bigger than they are, and they think that they have a lot more influence. I saw a great meme where this guy's like, I have like a million friends on Facebook, and he's like having his birthday party, and there are like 2 people there. Like, I think that it's like, it can be like a little, I think it's important to stay humble and really impact the people in front of you.
Right.
Love the people in front of you.
I had David Harris on one time, and it stuck with me, where, he said, like, when it came to Trump, he's a Christian, and Christians, like, he's no one to judge. But it's like your whole Twitter feed, all your feed is you talking about liberals. So it's like, you're fine to do analysis on liberals and tell the truth about liberals. But when it comes to Trump, you're like a Christian. Like, he's not just a pastor praying. Like, he's a political analyst. He just doesn't analyze Trump because he's friends with him. So then he says it's because he's a Christian. This is what I'm saying with Israel. It's like, you do analyze and speak about for years successfully. Congratulations. Politics. You cover it with the idea that you talking about it is going to make some sort of an impact, or at least, you're contributing to your country, which is commendable. So it's like,
Right.
this is why that biblical interpretation of Israel is destroying America, because it's like, with America, you'll analyze it, you'll talk about it, but with them, you'll just pray for it. Pray for America too, but it's like, you also talk about America and pray for America. But it's like, with Israel, it's like, I can't, nothing matters. So it's like, so if they fund things that go against your interests for their interests, that now
No, but I would,
Ukraine.
I know if they're funding the attack on Christians in Azerbaijan, is what you're saying. Like, I was unaware of that, and I would not support that, and I would call that out. That's wrong. Like, that's not right. That's wrong. I have no problem calling out wrong if I see wrong. I don't. And
The
if
reason you're unaware, though, the reason you're unaware is because 99.99999% of Republican media won't report these things. They won't talk about it, and they smear everybody who won't. That's the point. I'm not questioning your Christianity or even your interpretation for the sense. It's just like saying, like, the reason America is getting screwed up and the reason that nobody knows anything is because our party's fake, our media is fake, and their allegiance to that country is so extreme that they will not tell you. They will not tell anybody about it. Some people would care, some people wouldn't, but it's the same type of mindset. It's like, let's not even talk about this, because simply even reporting on this could be deemed hateful because they are the biblical ones.
Well, but I think sometimes, like, I can't know everything that's going on at all times. I mean, there's Christians being slaughtered right now as we speak in China. That's happening. There's underground churches there. I've talked to people that are operating there. I mean, it's bad. There's Christians being killed in Africa. I know a woman, she was in a village, and literally the entire village got wiped out while she was, like, away. It was horrible. A missionary that came to our church. So there's stuff like that happening all over the place. I guess because I speak more about Israel and politics, because I kind of hit the headlines, but I can definitely, if made aware of more things happening, I just can't touch everything. But if someone on my side is doing something wrong, I think it's important to call it out. I don't think that we are to just blindly follow, and I don't think that's healthy for the leader, right? Like, if Trump surrounds himself with people that are just yes men, and they don't tell him, hey, this isn't good, or you shouldn't do this, like, that's not helping Trump. That you're not helping your country. I was a co-chair for Trump in 2016, before anybody was a Trump person, before anyone was MAGA. Like, I was supporting him in all of that. And then with COVID and stuff, like, I did speak out on COVID. I spoke out on all that, to the spreading, the 2 weeks to spread, slow the spread, the shutting down, like, all of it. This is not good. We shouldn't do this. But I also, like, Trump's Achilles heel is surrounding himself with people that are not necessarily good people. Like, that is his weakness. Like, honestly, time and time again, it's surrounding yourself with people that definitely do not have your best interest at heart. That is his weakness. If I could talk to him, I'd say, hey, I don't think you're thoroughly vetting the people that are surrounding you or the people that are advising you, to be honest. But I think that it would be for his benefit for him to have people around him that disagree with him. Just like I have people. I mean, I'm one of 7 kids. I've got 6 other siblings. We argue all the time about stuff. But I know they love me. But calling people out or saying I disagree with that, or challenging someone's stance on something, doesn't mean that you don't support them. It means that you want them to really understand why they're doing what they're doing. And you either go deeper into what you believe, or you take a different stance. Like, okay, man, I've never looked at it that way.
Right. But that's the interpretation of Trump wants, like, that's the hope that Republicans have, that Trump wants to do the right thing. Like, I don't think Obama, maybe he wanted to do the right thing, but he never did, because he was surrounded by people that, his cabinet was handpicked, and so was Bush's, and so was Trump's. And it's going to be, again, it's going to be the same swamp. I would be shocked if there's even 3 people in it that aren't, because he's taken so much donor money, especially to pay for all the issues he's having now, which I disagree with all the stuff they're doing to him. But it's like, he's taking so much donor money this election. There's no way he's going to act right. But that's what I'm trying to say, is like, this is a fundamental disagreement that I have with most conservatives, is they just think all these people are getting tricked all the time and they don't like them. Like, so many people are like, anomaly, look, Ben Shapiro talked about the hate speech laws today. Charlie Kirk talked about the hate speech laws. Matt Walsh talked about it. there's people, not those specifically, but there's people that I know that I told in 2019, I was in the room with them. I was on a podcast with them. They heard what I said. I showed them the legislation. They didn't talk about it until this week. They never mentioned it one time. They just played dumb on the topic. So it's like people think that these people just figured it out or Trump just got tricked. And in my reality, or at least in my interpretation of it, there's big money to be played. It's like if I was on CNN and all of a sudden I looked faker, I'm not getting tricked. There's a deal there. It's like I know there's certain lines I can't cross to work with CNN. Everybody knows there's certain lines on Fox News. And the real line in Republican media is Israel. It's like, you cannot be, even Mehdi Hassan, who was on MSNBC, he was like more on the Palestine side and they got rid of him. It's like even at both, it's the uniparty. It's all media, most media. I mean, there's a few like that Al Jazeera, which is funded by Qatar, which is more pro-Palestine. There's definitely liberal bloggers and stuff that are more pro-Palestine. So it's not like everybody, but in the mainstream. So this is all I'm saying is like, that's the issue. It's like, I think everybody just thinks that all these people are mysteriously making mistakes or like, oh, Trump did it for his Christianity. I don't even think Trump really cares that much about the Bible, to be honest. I think he did it for his donors, and even DeSantis, like they're not coming up with this terminology. Like someone, if it was that, they would have their own rules. Like if I really cared about this and I wanted to actually help, I'd make up my own list of hate speech rules and they would actually make sense and it wouldn't be an infringement on the First Amendment. The fact that they're all using the IHRA list, how is that not proof of someone's handing it to them? Right. Someone's and they're
right. Yeah. I know. I agree. And I, like I said, I oppose all that, but I do think all of this is I think you're going to see a turn. I do think you're going to start to see a turn. Right now, you can't say anything, but I think you're going to see more and more people start to say things. And I think you're going to see, I don't know, more hate, more of that rise up. I do.
Perfect last question real quick for you, because this is like, in my opinion, the unholy relationship between Israel and the Jewish people there and the Christian Zionists. The Christian Zionists have this unholy relationship with them where they're like, okay, this is the biblical Israel. It's going to get really hateful. People are going to rise up against you. They're not like, oh yeah, we're going to, get destroyed. And then the Antichrist is going to come and then Jesus is going to return. They don't believe any of that. So it's like, they're just telling you guys like, yeah. But like, you think they like Christians who keep telling them that they're going to get destroyed or people are going to rise up? How would you feel? Like if I was Israeli and I have all these Christian Zionists around and they're like, oh yeah, everyone's going to rise up against you. That's what my book says. It's like, of course they're going to feel uncomfortable because all of their greatest allies think that their country is going to get destroyed and people are going to rise up against them and turn on them. So it's like, at a certain point, like they're not planning for the end times that you're planning for. They're planning for the Mashiach, and they're planning to have a whole different outcome. You know what I'm saying? Like the outcome they want is not to get destroyed. The outcome that they want, rightfully so, as a nation, like why would they want that? They want to protect themselves. They want to defend themselves, and they want to make sure that your prophecy never happens, because your prophecy not only means the end of their nation, but it means basically they're not getting into heaven.
It doesn't say that. It actually says that all of Israel will be saved. In Romans 11, it actually talks about the blindness coming off and them actually accepting Christ as the Messiah. That's 3.5 years into the tribulation. So it's not all doomsday for Israel. Actually, they actually come to Christ and recognize him as the Messiah.
Can I tell you that like a lot of Jews in Israel, not all of them, but like they hate Christians trying to convert them to Christianity. In fact, the Rabbi Barclay who debated Kenneth Owens, he specifically said that anti-Semitism started even before you said at the times of Jesus with the disciples trying to convert Jews. You know what I'm saying? Which is your religion is like, come to Jesus or else to get saved. They think that is anti-Semitism. So what you're saying that you think they're going to do in the end times, not only is that not what they want to do, but they consider what you just said one of the most severe and historical forms of anti-Semitism, which is a Christian trying to convert a Jew to Christianity. They despise that. They want their religious freedom.
Right. But I mean, okay. But at the same time, I can choose, okay, that's really going to upset me. I'm really going to be so fired up at these people. Or I could say, you know what? Forgive them. God love them. Just like Jesus did as they were nailing him on the cross. I'm not going to have any animosity. I'm going to walk in love. I'm going to share Jesus. I'm going to speak freely, and I'm going to occupy and influence the territory that God has given me. And I think that the most important thing to do is to make sure your heart is in the right place, regardless if you're calling people out or saying this is wrong or that funding's happening or this is happening. Like, make sure, check yourself and make sure your heart is right, because I feel like it's easy to get swept up into that mob mentality and to let offense and bitterness and anger control your emotions. But walk in love. And that's so hard to do, right? Like, forgiving people that have harmed you and forgiving people that hate you is the most difficult to do. You talk about people that have been abused and forgiving their abusers. You talk to people that have spoken to people that have murdered their children or their child. You talk to those people and you hear their stories about how they were able to forgive. We can forgive. You can forgive.
I agree. Do you consider them abusers, like, that you need to forgive?
I think that when you study scripture, they were part of that mob that said crucify. But at the same time, here's Jesus, King of the Jews, right? That was the sign above him as he was here, is Jesus, King of the Jews. Like, so there were good Jews there that day, just like there were bad Jews there. There were Jews that partook in killing Jesus. There were Roman soldiers there. There was the Sanhedrin. All of that culminated to that crucifixion, but also my sin put Jesus on that cross. Like, I too partook in that crucifixion because Jesus died for me, for my sin, right? To forgive me. And if he can forgive me, then I can forgive others. And I think
I'm not a hateful person. I forgive, but I think this is why the nation of Israel serves their interests, and they're not necessarily looking out for everyone's interests. To be fair, they know that Christian Zionists consider them the abuser to some extent. They want to basically pass it into law in these countries to say that it's hate speech to say that, to acknowledge that it's not these people directly, but in history that yes, there were people that killed Christ, and they're working to serve their interests extremely so much because they know that at the end times, Christian Zionists are going to want to convert them, which they don't want to do. They think that they're the abusers, which they don't see themselves as, and they don't want to be classified that as. And, they have the complete, almost opposite end times prophecy that Christians have. So it's like, in your hand, it's like, they're our greatest allies. And they're like, yeah, whatever these people think, because it's like they don't want to go where you want them to go. They don't want to convert when you want them to convert. They don't see the crucifixion the same way you see the crucifixion.
Right.
Like, nothing they see it, like, they don't see it that way at all. In fact, if you listen to Ben Shapiro talk about Jesus, it's like, talks about him like he's some ordinary guy who got put down for his troubles. And in some cases, people say he's a sex magician. There's certain texts in the Talmud that say he's boiling in hot poop for eternity. Right. So it's like, it's like this unholy alliance between Israelis and Christian Zionists is actually hilarious, because it's like, of course, like, America is going to fail because they're doing what's best for their nation, which makes total sense. But they don't, like, why would they trust a Christian Zionist who wants them to convert? Like you think, like, you have this blind trust that they really care so much. Like, of course they don't. They're protecting themselves for their prophecy, which is not to get destroyed, which is not to convert to Christianity, which is not this unholy alliance with people that think that they're going to do that. It's protecting themselves in every way from the people that think they're going to do that. And part of the ways, like, when they write op-eds that say, like, let's flood America and Europe with refugees, it's like, why do they feel that way? Because they don't care about you. Because they're like, why would we care that much about?
Right, but it comes down to truth, right? Is the Bible true? Are the scriptures true? Is what has been spoken will come to pass? Or are there, what they have, what they believe in, their whole faith, is that truth? And I guess what we'll see is what is truth, and watch it play out. And that's really all you can do.
Two more things, like, but can you admit it's a kind of funny relationship between two groups that have almost completely different end times prophecy? They don't want to be converted. They want to protect their nation. They want the Mashiach. You think the Antichrist is going to come and Jesus is going to come and they're going to have to convert, but they hate the fact that you think that, and they think it's hate speech, and hate speech laws are being passed in America to say that it's hate speech to say that. Like, isn't it a funny relationship America and Israel have?
Yeah, totally. It's totally a funny. I will totally acknowledge that. Like, I'm not, but that doesn't make it, like, that doesn't make the Bible less true. It doesn't make what will be not be. So I mean I think you just have to let it play out. I don't, but I'm not gonna. It is kind of humorous when you put it the way you put it, because it's like it's an interesting relationship, and it might be a relationship with people that are like, we don't even want a relationship with you. Like, I get it. So, but that I'm kind of like that way with everybody in the world, not just like the Jewish people, but with all people. You want to share your faith, and if you really do believe in your faith, you want to share it. Like, if you really believe that what you believe to is the truth, then my goodness, please share it with others, because if it's the truth, then you got to share it with others. And so as a Christian, as someone that does believe the Bible to be true, that does believe scripture, I'm devoted to it. And I do want all to know Jesus. Like, I do. So I mean, that's my heart. Right. And I understand people that come from different faiths and they're just as passionate. And I think that the more speech, the better, right? The more dialogue, the better. The more debate, the better. That's my stance. And I might not be able to be put in like a little category, because I don't really fit in with a lot of what people say on all sides. I'm kind of like, well, I agree with you there, but I don't agree with you on that. And I can see that, but I disagree there. So, I mean, that's just kind of my standpoint on all of it.
I appreciate you coming on, and I guess we'll wrap up on this note. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great discussion. I appreciate, most people are not willing to talk about it, so I really do appreciate it. And I wanted to say this. I think with the relationship, I think most Christians have never thought of it that way, because I think most pastors, and especially dispensationalist and Zionist pastors, their whole shtick is to like make sure no one ever really thinks about it. Even if you believe it biblically, like you do have to understand that you want to convert people that don't want to convert. You think that their land's getting destroyed. They're not planning for that. They're planning to protect themselves. So it's like, why would they like, you think like, oh, they trust, like, we got to trust them because they're a great ally. It's like, why would they trust you when you think they're going to die if they don't convert to Jesus, and they're passing speech laws in your country that consider that anti-Semitism? Like, I don't blame them for not trusting Christians. Like, why would they? Like, it's like they, and Christians are like, la di da di da, I don't even know it. So it's like, I think not everybody, but a lot of people in Israel are wildly aware of it. And I think that Christian Zionists in America are wildly unaware of it. With that, on that note, I just want to say, because I know, like you said, and there are millions, if not probably more, of people that do not see Israel as the physical land of Israel. They see it as the church. They see it as the Christian people. Obviously, there's two parts that'll probably be outlawed soon in the Bible that talk about the synagogue of Satan. He says there are those who will say they are but are not. I'll make them of the synagogue of Satan to let them know that I've loved you too. I interpreted that as, there's people that think they're above God, and, God says he loves all his children and the Gentiles, and that's not always popular, and he lit, but I'm saying it now because I know that this is probably going to be outlawed in America within 2 to 5 years. If it's
but those verses in I think is that even Revelation 1 or 2?
I think it's 3:9 or something.
Okay,
I think it's two something and 3 something. I don't know.
Jesus is specifically talking to John about the churches during that time. That's addressed to the 7 churches. After the 7 churches, once you hit Revelations 4, the church isn't even mentioned anymore. And then it goes into specifically talking and addressing Israel. So that there were Jews during that time, and that's specific to that time, because I think it was the church of Laodicea or Smyrna or Philadelphia, one of the churches. I know it's addressed twice in there. Though that's specific to those churches, there were people that were practicing the Jewish faith, but not in accordance to true Judaism at that time. And so that's separate from.
Do you think that most people in that ethnic group to this day are practicing Judaism? Do
I
you
think
think
there's a lot.
do you think the founders of Israel were practicing Judaism?
I think that there are, just as when you look at the Christian church, oh my gosh, like there's so much in the Christian church where they're professing to be Christians and you're not. You're
No,
not.
I agree. I could talk shit about Christians all day. I'm just saying, do you think, for the sake of this argument, I've talked probably too much shit about Christians.
No.
Lord forgive me. But it's like, do you think the founders of Zionism and Israel were religious? What if they were non-religious?
The founders was, if you're going to talk, sorry, if you're going to talk Zionism, that goes back to the Genesis and Abraham. That's
well, I'm talking about the modern, Zionism was a term coined by Theodore Herzl. It was the process of getting the land back for Jews. I'm just saying, like, what if they were not religious? Would you put them under that category? Because you're saying like that he was talking about in that revelation, he was talking about Jews that were falling away from Judaism. That's most Jewish people in the world now. They're not practicing, and the founders, I believe, were also not. I'm just saying.
Right. I think there's been a globalism agenda since, you go back to the Knights Templar. You can go back to, and then you go all throughout Bohemian Grove. You go to, Trilateral Commission. There's always been players on the scene that have been trying to bring about a globalist world order. Like that's been in play for hundreds and hundreds of years. Were the partakers that partook in found the 1948 Rothschild, were there players in that scene? I don't know, possibly, but that doesn't negate what God has spoken, right? Like, it's crazy to me that some Christians and people believe that like God didn't see that. Like God, when he was speaking to Abraham back in Genesis, he saw 1948. He saw 2024. Like, so
personally, I don't think that people don't see that. They're just like interpreting it in a different way. Like, let me give an example. Like most Christians, they're chopping off parts of baby penises in order to circumcise their kids. But there's chapters in the Bible that say that circumcision is of the heart, not of the flesh. So it's like, there's a discussion like you got to chop your kids' pee-pee off in order to get right with God. And then the ones that don't, it's not like they didn't see that God saw that. They just don't get the text that way. So I think that's this. It's like, it's not to say that God didn't know about globalism. Revelation talks about globalism, it's like, it talks about the mark of the beast and everything. It's just, they're not interpreting it that way. So it's like, for example, I'm not saying this completely aligns, but there were probably Christians hundreds of times throughout history who thought this is the end times. This is that moment. This is it. This is it. Right. And it wasn't. And guess what happened? They didn't. Hopefully they were right with God and they went to heaven, but it's like the world did not end. No. It was not that time. They just, got conquered. You know what I'm saying? There have been Christians who've conquered, Christians who've got conquered. So it's like, if you look at the Christian world in America, look at all the wars we're fighting. It's like, who are we fighting? Most of the time we're fighting more conservative people for a liberal world order, which even Mike Pompeo, a proud Zionist who says anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, he says we're doing a liberal world order. It's not a coincidence that we go to Ukraine and they get more liberal and we're fighting the more conservative nation. It's not a coincidence that we're trying to get Uganda to be gayer. And every time we go to a Muslim country, we want them to be gayer. It's like, we are the liberal world order in America, right? It's not to say that God didn't see that. It's just like people are not saying that he was not aware of what's happening. It's just people are not, they're not sold that this is the moment that like you're sold. This is the moment. And that's all I'm saying is like, I'm not saying the end time. I'm not saying the end times are going to be tomorrow, but it's like most dispensationalists, they're way more bullish on the end times are coming really, really soon, more than a lot of other Christians, because the truth is they're manifesting it. They're creating it. They're politically working for it. They're playing God, and they're getting closer and closer to that moment.
Right. And he lays it out in Matthew 24, what it'll look like. Right. And you're going to hear rumors of war and wars, and it'll be like the days of Noah. And when you study the days of Noah, what was happening with Noah, there was, this is going to take too long, but we got to wrap this up. But there was a lot going on with Noah at that time, right? And you had the Nephilim, if you want to go into that, and the reason why Noah was picked, right, to be on that ark because his race was pure. I think that we're living in times right now, especially with AI technology, where it is getting weird. It's like a transhumanism type thing. And I think that if it continues, what does that look like? And at one point, does God say enough, right? Enough, like he did with Noah. And Jesus said it will be like the days of Noah. So I think it's very important to be very in tune with what's happening with AI and all that technology, because that's something I think it's very important to keep an eye on as well. And that's a whole nother conversation, but.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you entertaining the discussion. I brought you on specifically because I knew you, I liked you, I trusted you, and I'm willing to talk to a lot of people, but I figured that, I knew your heart is in the right place, and I was excited to just be challenged as well, and anytime you want to chat or whatever, I really am grateful that you came on, and it's much better than talking to myself. I mean, it's easy to make the points when you're by yourself. It's a lot more difficult. And
I think it's important for me because I've been reading a lot of your posts and a lot of reviews, and I think it's important to like talk, because I'm like, no, because I really like Anomaly and I don't want to, but to hear your heart kind of in it, all of it has kind of made me think differently of you. Because I think it's important. I think it's important to hear people talk about it in a, and what the real concern is. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and can I say this too? I mean, this is the problem with calling the truth hate speech or speech hate speech, is that, you see a post of mine that's obviously awesome, charming, completely intellectual, accurate. And then you look at that and you say, oh my gosh, Anomalies, I'm just kidding, but Anomalies being hateful, and it's like, that's what the programming does to you. And I just want to say, people notice I had this shirt on, it's Big Pharma, not Big Pharma. I do not just walk around with shirts of myself all the time. Just like my head was popping up and I was like, I'm not a complete psychopath that just wears myself on clothes all the day. But today I did pick this shirt. I thought it was funny.
Okay. I like it. Nice. All right.
Well, thank you for coming on. We'll chat soon, and I appreciate you.
Okay. Thank you, Anomaly. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Dream Rare Podcast over and out.
Hey, what's going on, my friends? Just a few ways to stay in touch and support if you'd like to. The first way is dreamrare.com. We have blue beanies, black beanies, pink hats, other colored hats, Freedom versus Tyranny shirts, Stay Blessed long sleeve, God is Great long sleeve, and lots of more cool items coming soon. Dreamrare.com. Check out the shop to support. Everything's made in the United States. Handpicked by me. Patreon.com/raretalk for $5 a month. You can help support me, support the show. If you haven't noticed, unlike other channels, I don't work with very many sponsors, sometimes none at all. And part of the way I'm able to do that is with the dreamrare.com shop and patreon.com/raretalk. So thank you guys for keeping this show free.